Also, now that we've started recording, oh, and another person's joining. Here we are. All right. So just a few house rules too. Laura said that she's going to take some questions throughout, depending on like if you have any, and like raise your hands, put it in the chat. We'll be monitoring everything, everyone. So if you want to ask a question for Laura, just please make sure you put it there, or you raise your hand and we'll let you come on mic and you can ask your question. We'll also have time at the end for any questions that you might have. So, all right. Let's get her started. So Black History Month virtual lecture series with the Simcoe County Museum. Today we have Laura LaChapelle with us, and the County of Simcoe would like to acknowledge the land on which we gather today as the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, which includes the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We also recognize the Huron-Wendat, who occupied these lands prior to the middle of the 17th century. We embrace the enduring presence and partnership of the Indigenous peoples of this region, including the Chippewa Tri-Council First Nations, comprised of the Bosole First Nation, the Chippewas of Rama, and the Georgina Island First Nation. We would also like to recognize the diverse Métis and Inuit communities within our region. The County of Simcoe is dedicated to honoring our Indigenous history and culture and is committed to coming together to learn, heal, and create future prosperity, respect, and understanding for all of our communities. So welcome today, and our speaker, Laura, serves her community with a passion for community support, volunteering, and empowering youth. Laura has been deeply involved in creating community engagement, particularly through the arts. She has 35 years of experience participating in community projects, leading art initiatives, and inspiring others for a call to service. With her experience being a part of several committees and boards, she has seen the shifting demographics happening across Simcoe County. Laura is dedicated to making a difference in people's mindset about diversity and inclusiveness. After achieving a Bachelor's of Anthropology from the University of Toronto, Laura focused on theater arts. She developed local theater in Collingwood and Wasaga Beach and saw this as an opportunity to bring youth together in a safe, diverse environment. Laura has been publicity chair for Wasaga Community Theater, theatrical director of the town of Wasaga Beach, and freelance journalist for both the U of T and Creemore Echo. Laura was also named among Canada's top 100 Black women to watch in 2023. So Laura's here today to talk to us about Through My Eyes, Change and Challenge Being Biracial in Simcoe County. This presentation explores the personal journey of Laura, who grew up in a mixed race in Simcoe County. It offers a candid reflection on the shifting dynamics of racism over the past 4 decades. Through her lens of lived experience and impactful nonprofit work, Laura sheds light on the path toward fostering greater understanding, inclusion, and belonging. When it comes to diversity, what does the future hold for Simcoe County? So on that note, we'll turn it over to Laura and she can get rolling.
Well, thank you. What a lovely introduction. And I really appreciate the opportunity that the Simcoe County Museum has given me and a platform for my voice to be shared. Being mixed race, we don't always get that opportunity for our own voice to be heard. So I really appreciate this platform and I hope it makes a difference. So a little bit about myself growing up here in Simcoe County. We moved up here in 1981. I have gone back and forth between Toronto and here, but I currently live in Wasaga Beach. I'm a 50-year-old woman, happily married with 5 amazing children. 3 of them I gave birth to, and 2 of them are my stepchildren. I have been a server in my younger days, but I've also done 20 years in healthcare as a PSW, and the past 3 years serving as program director in the nonprofit sector for Making Change, which is one of the amazing, we have a few Black-led organizations in Simcoe County, so I'm proud to be a part of Making Change and making that difference. And it's been interesting when I hit 50 to be able to look at the arc of my life and the impact that it's had and what the future holds for me and my place in Simcoe County and moving that needle forward when it comes to anti-Black racism and the work that's happening here in Simcoe County. So thank you, and I'm excited for this presentation. Please do feel free to ask questions throughout. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And this is a safe space, so feel free to ask me a question that you might think would be maybe a silly question or an uncomfortable one. I'm open to answering questions as honestly as I can. Um, I've had a lot of experience, obviously speaking, but it's important that people know that I'm comfortable with all the questions that you may have. So, where was I born? I was born in Toronto, and I was born in the North York Hospital, I believe, and I lived my younger years in the Jane and Eglinton area. My life was very wonderful. I had friends, I went to school, and I had this wonderful outgoing little life and didn't realize that I was somebody of a different race, that people saw me as something different. I just felt a part of the environment that was around me. And I remember at my school, there was lots of people of all different racial backgrounds. It wasn't until I moved up here to Simcoe County that I realized I am different. So when I talk about biracial, it by definition it just means somebody that is a mix of two different distinct races. And of course race, as we know, is a cultural construct. It is just a definition of a group of people that have features that are unique to them and may also be associated with a geographic location. So my mix is Jamaican, French, and Ukrainian, and I have very strong ties to my Jamaican side as well as my father and his Ukrainian side. And that was really lovely to kind of have that mix all together. So in 1981, my parents decided to move up north. They wanted to raise their kids in a smaller community, kind of get out of the city and have that more wholesome. I may be jumping on that definition, but a more wholesome kind of a environment for to raising their kids. So we had no idea what that was going to look like until we moved up here. So I'm just going to move along a little bit here in the slides. This is a collage of our family, and I have a father, and I have a brother, and an amazing mother, and we're all very close. My father did pass away in 1998, so it is my mother, my brother, and I. And this is a window to a mixed race family. So you see my father there on the left. He's the one that's you got Ukrainian and French, and that's my beautiful mother there, who's of Jamaican ancestry, and then that's myself in the middle, and then my brother to the right. Now, as you notice, my brother looks a lot darker than I do, but even though we do look very different, we have the same biological parents. And that's interesting when you have a mixed race family. You never know with each child what that combination is going to look like. My brother and I are very close, but our lived experiences as siblings were very, very different. And they became very obviously different when we all moved up to Simcoe County. There's a young picture of me when we were still in the city with my mother. And then there is a nice picture of me and my father. I was very close with both my parents, but I did have a very special bond with my dad. So where we moved up to was actually Dunedin. For those of you that know Creemore, Dunedin is just a little smaller community outside of Creemore. In fact, it's not even a town. It's called a hamlet. I believe there's probably more livestock than there is people in that community. So I have a lot of fond memories of growing up in Dunedin and getting to know farmers. Of course, living in Jane and Eglinton, I had no knowledge of farm animals. So to come up to this area and to make friends with farm children and go on a farm. Very different experience. I felt like I was in almost like a twilight zone because it was just so completely different. I did make a quick best friend, Ginny, and her family had a sheep farm. So I remember my first sleepover and she had a younger brother, and I got to wear his mud boots and just going through where the sheep pen was and experiencing livestock for the first time. It was a very interesting experience. Within our first year of moving, I do have distinct memories of the community and certain individuals around us that would make racial slurs. We were a new addition to Dunedin and Creemore, and we did stand out. And that was new for all of us to experience that. But even at 8 years old, I have memories of that because it was such a change from living in Toronto. But we did have a lot of great memories growing up. There's a picture of me. This is post living in Dunedin. And I remember that my mom had to cut my hair. It was difficult to deal with sometimes because my hair wasn't exactly black hair, nor was it exactly white hair. It was sort of in between. And that was something that was a challenge to deal with and to know how to handle. And we all sort of felt a little bit like, what do we do with my hair? So it would be back in a ponytail a lot, but it was really difficult to brush my hair out and to know exactly how to style it. But we did have a wonderful time with our Jamaican side of the family. We'd go back down to the city and we would have curry goat and rice and peas, and we would have some wonderful, wonderful times with our family. I felt like I belonged with the family, although I was the lightest out of all of my cousins. But also with my dad's side of the family, which is the Ukrainian side, we would celebrate Ukrainian New Year, and we would go down. We'd have pierogies, we'd have cabbage rolls, we'd, have borscht. It was all just wonderful food, and I was very close with my dad's side of the family, and I really appreciated having both sides and having them close to me at the same time. So as an adult, I can actually make both curry goat and pierogies. I remember making pierogies with my father in the kitchen, and my mother would have Stevie Wonder music going on, or Johnny Mathis, or George Benson. And what I was really important to me was that my home life felt safe. I felt comfortable. I felt supported by both my mother and my father. And as I started to realize that I was looked upon as different in the school, it was so wonderful to be able to come home and have a cry about it. And I had support from both my mother and my father. My father was particularly good at teaching me how to voice myself, how to stand up for myself. I was always an outgoing child. I wasn't shy, and I certainly had no problem speaking up for myself. And I appreciated having my dad's support in accomplishing that. And I really had to learn very quickly that I need to say no. I need to say that's not okay. I remember pushing a boy down in the mud that had called me a racial slur. I remember at one point in school, I was referred to as a monkey by one boy, and I took my pencil and I flicked it at him, and it hit him in the arm, and I got in trouble for that. So, those memories stay with you. I remember bringing codfish and ackee, which is the national food of Jamaica, to school. And I opened it up, and it has a really strong smell. And everybody in the classroom was making fun of that. So I learned, okay, I'm not going to bring my cultural heritage food to school anymore because that was difficult. It was also, my hair. People would want to touch my hair. I would get called poodle. People would try and stick things in my hair to see if they could find it. There was those kind of experiences that I lived with in public school. I was the only racialized student in the Creemore Public School during that time. I know it's changed now, but at the time it was rather lonely. So I'm so glad I had my best friend Ginny who was there to support me. I would be out and about, and I would have a lot of people come up and guess, what are you? So when we talk about that as a microaggression nowadays, I didn't realize that that's what was happening. But at the time, people would come up. Uh, they probably would, ask my friends or ask my parents, things like that. It was just very obvious that people would trying to guess what I was because I didn't look black and I didn't look white. I'd be called exotic or special or a hybrid. Mulatto was a common term that, isn't okay to use, but that was something that I was referred to. A lot of people would guess Portuguese, indigenous, Egyptian, and even to this day, I still get people trying to guess, what are you? And when I would say I'm Jamaican and Ukrainian, they would, some people would actually say to me as a little child, is that even okay? Does that even happen? I felt like I was some sort of science experiment. And when, you're mixed race back in the 70s and the early 80s, there wasn't a lot of children that were mixed race. And so I really felt very isolated. There were times, though, that I would turn that into almost like a game, people trying to guess. And I tried to have fun with it because I think that was a way to sort of push down those feelings of pain and feelings of being alone. So I just wanted to provide this as I look back on my childhood and my struggles with identity. When you open up a bank account, back then you had to identify your race. Those kind of lists still exist, although, the variety of the options to select from are far more varying. But back then it was black, white, Asian. And so I wasn't too sure what box to check. So you have those struggles with identity when you grow up mixed race. You're feeling like you're too much. I was too much black. I couldn't pass for white, or I wasn't enough. I was not enough black. And even amongst the black community or some jokes, with family members, it would, be jokes about, what happened. Why didn't she get some more color? The printer ink ran out when Laura was born. And those things sort of stay with you. Constantly explaining my heritage was another one. I'm not too sure why people are fascinated by what my mix is, but that seems to be something that was always and consistently to this day a topic of conversation. Also, feeling a lack of representation. When there's not a lot of people that look like you feel alone. You feel like you don't belong to something and that you're not a part of something, that maybe I was not supposed to have been born. I remember going through a phase where I felt like I was adopted. I don't look like my mother. My brother looked like my mother. I didn't exactly look like my father either, or was I a mistake? Should I not have happened? And those are feelings that children that are mixed race can have. Not everybody has that. This is my experience, but these are common points of feeling and thoughts, especially as I've had more and more conversations with other mixed race individuals. So, what were the teen years like? That's me, probably in my early teens. I can't remember exactly the year. That's my brother there. As you see, we're very close and we're still close to this day. So what I found as I entered puberty was I was having trouble struggling with my own sense of beauty. Back in the late 80s, who were the idols? Who were the icons of beauty? You had, Madonna. You had, female icons like that. I certainly did not look like Madonna, although I tried the blue eyeshadow. It never seemed to work. Never quite worked with my skin tone. But I tried. I tried with all the bangles and the side ponytail and the bright pink shirts and everything. But try as I might, I could not look like Madonna. And what I also learned to do was straighten my hair. I was tired of dealing with curly hair, with it frizzing, that fear. And I think whether white or black, no matter what race, when you have hair that reacts to moisture and humidity, your biggest fear is your hair frizzing out. So I found by relaxing my hair, it would at least look a little bit more straight and I could pass maybe a little bit more closer to white. And the fact that I had to go through that as a teenager, that's really difficult. And young girls, we struggle with beauty and how we fit. We want, we want people to notice us. We want to feel attractive. We want, of course, I'm a heterosexual female. I wanted boys to notice me, and that was definitely very difficult. There's something that I've learned now that I didn't know back then. It's called code switching. And that's when you develop a strategy to fit in, to look more like. And so you flip that switch and you talk more white or look more white, do more makeup like a white person, or the clothes I would wear that would identify me as being more white passing. And now I understand what that's called. But back then, for me, it was just survival. There was no term for it. There would be lots of boys I had a crush on, and my mother can attest, I was sometimes overly dramatic when it came to boys, and I would come home in tears, and this boy had a crush on me, or this boy, did this or that. There were boys, though, that I knew that there was a connection, but they identified really quickly that as much as I like you, I cannot date you. There's no way I can bring you home to my parents and say, I'm dating that black girl. And that was really difficult to see potential romance not even get off, springboard off because of my racial background. And it was sad. I do appreciate that some of those boys, when they became adults, they became men. There's two of them that actually came up to me as adults and had the maturity and the forethought and reflected upon some of their choices. They were kids, I get it, but they apologized. They apologized for how they treated me. And one young man, he apologized that he never gave us a chance as a romance. And that really meant a lot to me, especially the one that apologized for picking on me and for saying racial slurs. When you get told racial slurs, when you are a mix of things, it can really mess with your mind because you don't understand why, and it still is hurtful. The one thing that I do remember is that the friendships that I had around me and that sense of community within my own family, those are the things that really, really helped to get me through the tough teen years. I had an opportunity to work at a camp that brought in kids from the city, and that was a great time in my life to go and spend the summers. I got to be with other racialized counselors, racialized kids, and feel a part of, feeling like I belonged somewhere. And I have a lot of really wonderful, wonderful memories of that time in my life. Another thing that was important to me was to stand out. I didn't want to be put to the side and ignored. So I didn't want to also be recognized as a stereotype. So I wanted to stand out. Now, one significant book that I came across in my teen years, maybe some of you have heard of this rather famous author. His name is Lawrence Hill, and he wrote a book called Blacker the Berry, Sweeter the Juice. Because I was really understanding that even if you have a drop of black in you, you are considered black. And Lawrence Hill is somebody that is mixed race. He had a black father and a white mother. He is a little bit older than me, but he sort of was that first generation of mixed race children. And reading his book was really impactful. It was the first time that somebody that looks like me, that has a similar experience to me, had a voice to paper. And I read his book probably a few times over my teen years. And that was really invaluable to have that. And it made me realize that the lack of representation can be really, really difficult when you're growing up mixed race. So, what was my drive? To get out of Creemore. Really important to just leave the country and go to the city. And my goal was to head to university. When I started at Collingwood Collegiate Institute. I actually spent grade 9 and 10 at Stainer High School. Did not enjoy that at all. I was the only student of color in the school. There were, of course, some wonderful experiences. I got to go to OFSA for track and field. I did run really well, and I enjoyed being a part of that athletic community. But I transferred to CCI, and for the first time, I had a Black teacher. Never experienced that, but that was life changing to work under Charlton Jones. He is somebody that ended up working at the school board, and a period of time he was, in fact, principal of CCI, but he taught history and ancient history. And I loved watching him teach us. I loved history. I mean, I've always been somebody that enjoyed education, but I think that there was a sense that, who knows where she's going to go. There wasn't that sense of belief and where I could go and what I could achieve. And I found that with Mr. Charlton Jones. I did have a couple of other teachers that were nice champions, but I found with him, I could speak with him. I was able to have conversations. He would allow me into his office, and we would, have these great conversations. And that's when I knew I'm heading off to university. And so I became an adult. I was 19 and off I went. Had such a wonderful, wonderful time at university. What was special about going to university was I was the first one on both sides of my family to, in fact, graduate with a degree. And that was really important. I was the first one on the Jamaican side of the family as well as the Ukrainian side of the family. Fortunately, my father did pass away while I was completing my degree, so he didn't get to be there. But I know he would have obviously been very, very proud of me. So that's, of course, a picture, probably just maybe a year or two, maybe a couple years before my father passed away. He did pass away in a car accident in Collingwood, and of course, that was devastating for our whole family. And what was particularly difficult for me was he was my tie in the family. Um, because I found that my brother and my mother, because they looked alike and I was lighter skinned and I was very close with my father, we had a lot in common. Him and I represented, that more lighter side of the family. So with him gone, it felt like that balance had also disappeared. We used to take some family trips together, and one trip we took down to Florida. There was a family reunion we were going to. And as we were driving back up from Florida, we really were starving. We were hungry. We were driving through, I believe it was a state of Georgia. And we're not experienced with going down to the States. But we went into this buffet place. And when we walked in, there were all the black patrons on one side of the restaurant, and there were all the white patrons on the other side of the restaurant. And there was the buffet at the back. And I just remember we all stopped and looked around. We looked at each other because I think there was a debate about should we go? We just didn't know where to sit because there was nobody else that was mixed race in that restaurant. And there was a bit of a debate about where to sit. Do we sit at the black side? Do we sit at the white side? So we found a table that was kind of married in the middle. And my dad and we were more at this end where more of, where all the white people were. And my mom and my brother were at this end where they were closer to the black side. It was such a weird experience to have that. And we ate as quickly as we could eat, and then we were out of there. It felt so uncomfortable. But that's just, one of those examples of the balance when you are growing up mixed race, how to navigate through things, how to handle racism. My father was such a wonderful voice to stick up for his children when I mean, I can't even imagine as a white father having this baby in 1969 that is fully dark and doesn't look at all like him. But there was never a question in his mind that this is my son. And, he loved his son. I mean, he loved both of his children. He was an amazing father. And I'm just so thankful that, we had that presence and that he was so dedicated, both mom and dad were so dedicated to each other because I know people would have counted them out. You shouldn't mix. It'll be too difficult for the kids. What are you thinking? All those kind of things, maybe even laughs and comments behind their backs. But there was never any doubt that they were in it for the long haul and they were dedicated to each other. So my hat's off to both my parents for providing Jim and I with that safe home. So at university, what a great experience going to U of T. And what an honor. I was so thankful that I had that. And I'm so proud of having my degree. And I found that I was blossoming in that environment because I was around this multicultural experience. Although it's in the science program, there was not a lot of Black representation in the science program, but there was a lot of Asian representation and, just international students. And what a great sense of exposure and that around me. And what I did learn is that I definitely have a sense of leadership. I was part of the diversity group and my women's fraternity. And I knew that I meant to be a leader one day. I didn't know how that would look, but I knew that I was meant to be a leader. A little bit about some of my extracurricular activities. I love theater. My father was an actor from Toronto, and I grew up following him in theater. So even to this day, I still do theater. I was just on stage in Thornbury Community Theater. They did the dining room. I also direct theater. So that's, again, a part of just being very comfortable with my sense of self. And I love, just being able to have that voice up on stage, even though I'm creating a different character, but it is, definitely lovely to have that. What I did notice though is I wasn't cast in certain roles. I was never cast as Sandy from Greece. I was not cast as Eliza Doolittle. Um, I mean, some of it may not, may just be I wasn't the right fit at the right time, but definitely race was a factor in some of the roles I was given. I was given roles like the hussy barmaid or somebody exotic or the maid, things like that. I was or the rough and tumble character. But I soldiered on with theater. So now we get to my adulthood. I did come back home when my father had passed away, and I have three children that I raised. So I live here in Wasaga Beach. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to talk about this one slide first about some of the leadership things that I have done. In this newspaper clipping, that's my brother, that's me down below. And to the right is Lincoln Alexander. And what an amazing Canadian icon. There was an essay contest that was going on for an organization called the Parents of Black Children. And I wrote an essay and we had to do it as a speech. And so that was an opportunity, just those little hints of knowing that I was meant to be a leader, that I was meant to be an advocate for the Black community. So here's a picture of my three biological children. So I've got my daughter, Courtney, and in the middle, my son, Troy. And then at the end there is my youngest, he's 14, and that is Carter. So their childhood has been interesting because they're growing up with a mom that has a Black lived experience. They're growing up having a Black grandmother and being very close with the Black side of their family, of course, as well as their white side. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm talking about their closeness with the Black side of the family. And it's been interesting raising them. So conversations about race are part of the home life. My kids, well, especially the first two, the two oldest, Courtney and Troy, they are white passing. So anybody that sees them would not imagine necessarily that they have Jamaican ancestry. And so there were times when they were really, really young. And, my mother would be pushing them in the stroller, and people would ask if my mother was the nanny. I was pregnant with Troy, and there was an older lady that had said, if you want a whiter baby, eat more cottage cheese and you'll have a whiter baby. These are the kind of experiences that I would have just even raising children. People talking about whether or not my kids looked more of this side or more of that side. And, again, when we talk about microaggressions, that is a fine example of some more microaggressions. But my kids have really appreciated having that cultural exposure of all sides. They all love curry goat. They all love pierogies. Courtney and I will make pierogies from scratch. I'm so happy to have passed on that recipe. But both my older kids in particular in school, they would see other kids talk about um, black black things or making jokes or comments because they were white passing. And it wasn't until years later that I really appreciated what their experience has been because they have such a close connection with their Black ancestry. They are experiencing forms of racism, and it's really difficult for them. It was hard, especially Courtney, now that she's in university. She's starting to talk about some of her own experiences and sharing that as part of some of her essays for university. And those kind of things were really difficult. Troy had a couple of racialized friends. There's one young female that he was really close with. And when people would make a racial slur, he had no problem stepping in there and being an advocate. And I'm so proud that my kids have learned through me to also be an advocate, and for Troy to just stand up and have no problem getting in front of somebody and saying that's not okay, to say that. So my youngest son there, if you take a look, he is racialized looking. He looks mixed race. And so his life experience is very different than my first two that are white passing. He is identified as being somebody that has Black ancestry. He has been called racial slurs. He has had jokes and comments said about him. And of course, we're working with his mixed race hair, which I love bringing out those wonderful curls that he has. Now that I know how to work with them, we do have a lot of great time going to a Black hair salon and things like that. But at the same time, his lived experience is very different than his two siblings. And so, being a mom raising kids that have these very different experience, it's been, good. I feel like I'm in a good place to help raise Carter through his experience, and also, sharing and working with my two older kids and how they feel about their heritage and their own experience. And I think, anyone that is a mom, we learn how to defend our children. We learn how to speak up for them. And, they all seem to enjoy doing that. They get pleasure out of being a voice. And so this slide here is just sort of that sense of summarizing how that feels as to navigate mixed race and microaggressions and feeling like a science experiment. hearing racial comments and jokes, and isolation in conversations about racism. Being mixed race and having children that, have a mixed race identity as well, they don't always feel like they have a right to have a voice in a conversation about racism. Well, you're not fully black. You don't know what it's really like, because they're white passing. Or if I'm in a Zoom meeting, you don't necessarily clearly see that I am necessarily mixed race in a Zoom meeting. So I might hear a joke or a comment or a microaggression, and they don't realize. And, as soon as I point out, hello, I was just kidding. My bad, my bad. Things like that are just, adding to that mixed race microaggression experience. It's different than a full black racism, and it needs to be identified for its own path, its own little compartment. Yeah, that's a better word that I'm looking for. Its own compartment. And I think that's why having that mixed race voice is really important. Once I started working for Making Change, which is one of the Black led organizations in Simcoe County, I realized the value of what my experiences have been to show other biracial individuals that you're not alone, that those feelings that you've had, those experiences that you have had are normal. They are okay. They are, what you've been through, but you're not alone. It's not something that's, just in your head. They are real and they have meaning, and they affect each and every one of us. My call to service, and that comes from long line in the family. um, Even just back in my mom's childhood, her parents had started the Jamaican Canadian Association. It started in, I think it was like the basement of her parents' house. And so they had that call to action. My great grandmother was part of starting the first Black Baptist church in Toronto. There, it's in my DNA, that call to service. So being a part of Making Change has been life changing for me, but it's also been a source of healing, a source of realizing that those things that I went through in my childhood are, um, they have a name, they have a real identity, and I can, turn that into something positive. It's given me a new sense of power and a new sense of identity. And having a mixed race voice. When I have an opportunity to talk in the school system, I see children that are mixed race. And it was the first time, I think it was last year, it hit me. This one girl, she looked at me, and I could tell she was mixed race. She looked at me and she recognized right away, that's what I look like. And I didn't have that going to school. There's nobody that looked like me, nobody that was an adult. And so I realized the special place that I have for, that young person. There was a young boy in a school that I was at just a few weeks ago, and I was talking about anti-Black racism, and I of course share right away that I'm Jamaican and Ukrainian, and that boy said, "I'm Jamaican and I'm French." And he was so excited. He said, "We're like the same." And that was so sweet. It warmed my heart. And I hope that he knows that, there are other people like him out there in the world, and that he's not alone. And that's been really important in the work I do. And I'm excited to continue that work with Making Change. So this was a special moment in my life. A year and a half ago, I got recognized by CIBWE, the Canadian International Black Women Excellence, and I received an award. And it was recognized as Canada's top 100 Black women to watch in 2023. And this is all across Canada to have that recognition. And it was just so special. I was up there on the stage, and there was other women that were mixed race, because at first you think you have imposter syndrome. Why would I be recognized as a Black woman? I'm mixed race. learning to let that go and know, yes, I am a Black woman. I have a Black lived experience, and to be recognized, nationally as somebody to watch. That was really, really exciting. And so what I've seen as, working with making change is the diversity changes that have been happening in Simcoe County. And we're seeing that shift. We're seeing movement of people of different racialized backgrounds coming up here. I was here in Simcoe County when there was hardly any, and now so many are coming in. And sometimes it might feel like for some, they're coming in faster than we can even process, that we can even accept. But I think everybody needs to know that diversity is a fact. It's a fact that our dynamics here in Simcoe County are changing. And you see organizations creating DEI programming, hiring DEI staff. You see both the school boards working to bring in people to help, bringing in diversity. You see more and more diverse teachers and programming, celebrating different cultures. I mean, never mind just Black History Month. You see the schools celebrating all different cultures and making sure that students are getting that exposure. You see events and activities supported by municipalities to bring in more cultural programming. I love working with our local libraries. They are so wonderful and open to bringing in diverse programming. Is it perfect? Is there room to grow still? Absolutely. But I still want to acknowledge that there is change that has been happening slowly but surely, but it is there. It has been such a change for me to see where things were at 40 years ago to now. Do we still have some ugly experiences? Sure. Do I still experience microaggressions? 100%. There's a girl I went to school at CCI, and she is mixed as well, and we've actually remained friends to this day. I'm in a store, and this just happened 2 months ago. I'm in a store. There was lots of people in the store. I was the only racialized person in the store, and I had my back turned. And my friend that came in, that's also mixed race, I didn't realize who was coming in the store, but the server, the woman at the checkout that was helping me, she noticed who was coming in the store, and she said, "Oh, are you two sisters?" And we both looked at each other. The assumption that two mixed race people in a room must be sisters, even though there was multiple white people in the room. She didn't ask if two white people were sisters. She asked if me and this other person were sisters. And so, there is still room for change, for growth, for continuing to develop Simcoe County to be more and more inclusive. Um, so that's my presentation. I want to thank everyone for listening. It was kind of nice to share all those stories in a 45-minute time period.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, Laura. We had
Thank you.
Natasha say thank you for being in this space and sharing your truth.
Oh,
And we have Nicole who's sending you hearts, lots of hearts going around. We've got a lot of thank yous. And and that Simcoe County's lucky to have you, and we are. So
thank you.
that's amazing, everyone. Does anyone have any questions for Laura? I know, oh, we have Emily Ranta. There we go. You can come off mute, Emily.
Thank you. Hi, Laura. Sorry,
Hi.
my internet is horrible, so I'm not able to be on camera. But so my future, I'm, in a relationship where I will end up having biracial kids, and I just wanted to ask from your perspective, what is some advice for, parents or future parents of biracial kids that you would give to them?
My first advice is to have open conversations as a family because, no matter what, they are going to experience some degree of microaggression, some degree of racism. I'm not too sure, every a biracial child looks different. And so, that's why I wanted to share about my children, because two of them, have that white passing look, but one of them is racialized. But our conversations as a family is always about being support for each other, being an advocate for each other, but also it's important to help your children develop a voice for themselves. It's all in good to have allies around us that can, speak for us, but it's also important to learn for yourself how to be an advocate, how to speak up, and how to say that's not okay. A lot of times we want to hide hide ourselves, or not get into any sort of trouble or get into drama. We don't want to be showcased in that sort of negative way, but at the same time it's important that we learn to speak up for ourselves. And that's just coming from my own experience as somebody biracial. My brother, he had a tougher time with speaking up for himself because he's a little bit shyer than me. He doesn't talk. He doesn't have as much as an aggressive personality in the same way I did. And I know that, for him, the racial experiences he had impacted him, equally as traumatic, but how we both handled them were a little bit different just because we're different personalities. I think showing them love no matter what, if they feel loved unconditionally, then that, and that to me as a parent, that's a no-brainer. But also making sure that they have a connection with both all their cultures. So, I do know that there's a couple of white women that have mixed biracial children, and the father isn't in the picture, and I've met them at different events of making change. And so they've asked me a question because they identified right away that I was biracial. I look like an adult version of their kids, and so they would ask some advice because they don't have that contact with the Black side. But unfortunately, no matter what, that child is going to know that they are part of a Black culture, whether that parent is involved or not. So bringing them out to Black cultural events, introducing them, to that part of them, they won't start looking for it in negative ways. Hopefully, that is the hope. But I think that is important. And I really appreciate when, a single parent takes that opportunity to make sure that their mixed race child has that exposure. I hope that answered your questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Those are really, really great points. Yes, especially so important of acknowledging both sides. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Laura, for sharing.
No, it was a great question.
Amazing. Anyone else have any questions for Laura? So I have one, Laura. I was wondering what role, so when you're in the theater, what role was it that made you keep going? Because I know it can't have been easy to have been passed over, like you said, for certain roles and whatnot. And you said you soldiered on. Was there a specific role that just kept you having that passion for the theater?
I think it was when I was cast because I did a lot of theater with my dad. So sometimes I had to contend with casting with what my dad envisioned, because I was his daughter. So he was doing a 1920s musical review. And, sort of at that age where I was no longer looking teenagery, I was starting to look more adult. And, in my younger days, I kind of looked like a young Meghan Markle. And, even in my physique as well. And so I wanted to be Betty Boop. And of course, that would be really difficult for a father to envision his 18-year-old daughter playing and embodying Betty Boop. But of course, Betty Boop is based on a racialized person, way back in the 1920s. And so I had such a fun time recreating Betty Boop. And that was the role that clicked, that it isn't about me trying to change for a role. It's about bringing me out in a role. It doesn't matter about race. And so even as a director now, I do blind color casting. When I directed Willy Wonka, I had a mixed race woman play Mrs. Bucket. She was married to a white person, and her son that played Charlie Bucket, he was full white. But it didn't matter, you know, and that I love Bridgerton, right? Because Bridgerton is totally colorblind in its you know, in its casting, and it doesn't matter the different races that are in there, they all feel equal. And so it's the same with Willy Wonka. It didn't matter to me. If you were great for the role, that's what you got.
Amazing. We have a few other comments in the meeting chat.
Oh,
So scrolling up. Sharman said, that was so wonderful, Laura. Congratulations on your accomplishments and look forward to hearing more about your journey. We have Mel who said, thank you, Laura. Such a wonderful presentation.
thank you.
And Marie said, amazing stories, some I hadn't heard. So, and then we have Jacqueline who said, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I got teary-eyed when you started talking about your children's experiences with having my son who's biracial and just thinking about how confusing it can be for them. So thank you again for your openness. And we really do want to thank you, Laura. You create a safe space for lots of children in this community now through making change and through your work in the theater. And it's really showing you're doing great work out there. And I would you like to talk about what Friday is coming up so that people can attend?
Oh, yes. Oh, that'd be
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you. So we have Canvas for Change. It's a Black youth art exhibit showcase. And we have 11 amazing Black youth artists from all around Simcoe County. They've been working with Ashante Blackwood. She's an artist from Toronto, and they've created these impactful pieces. Some of them, you know, have emotional depth. Some of them have more of a lighthearted perspective, but it's their point of view. And we really wanted to have that opportunity for, you know, Black youth artists to have their voice, to show that there's power in their voice. I mean, quite frankly, I want all youth to know that their voice has power. But, you know, this was a great opportunity for specifically the youth that are connected with the community that Making Change supports. So it's up in the Carnegie Room at the McLaren Art Center. Friday night is the opening reception from 6:30 to 9. And we're so excited. The other winter exhibits at McLaren Art Center are opening up at the same time. So it's like a whole big McLaren opening that's happening. Also, March 1st, Saturday, March 1st, we're doing Radiant Roots, a Black cultural expo at the Innisville Idea Lab and Library. And that's an example of a great opportunity, especially for mixed race families to, you know, bring their family, bring their kids, and get some of that cultural exposure that is sometimes lacking here in Simcoe County. We have a Pan-African fashion show, Black-owned business vendors, engaging speakers, music, activities for the kids, book reading by a local Black author. So we're very excited about those two projects.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's been great chatting with you and listening to your experiences. And everyone in the chat and who joined us online has been really grateful for you sharing your story. So we really appreciate
Thank you, everybody. And I appreciate everyone's time and listening in. So thank you and good luck. And I hope to see everybody out at some Black History Month event. But follow us online. www.makingchangesc.com and sign up for our newsletter as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Laura. Bye.